Vaden asks, what are some of your favorite prog bands outside of the classics? Rush, Yes, etc.
Utopia, who, even though they evolved into a pop band, they certainly started out as a prog band. Eddie Jobson and Zinc, I mean, that's certainly still a big name, but major influence.
Yeah, Ozark Tentacles, I classify that as progressive rock, and been into them for quite a while. I listen to a lot of new, they're sort of listed in progressive in a way that they're more psychedelic than anything, and they're fairly new bands on the scene. I really like a band called Temples, and there's a guy named Jocko Gardner that I'm listening to a lot.
There's a Swiss band called Island that did a one-off, really amazing album in the late 70s. That
Devin Townsend. I mean, I enjoy watching some of the stuff he's doing.
Scott asks, how is it that GH is able to make every album so very different in feeling and sound than the one before it?
It's almost really more of a question of how difficult it would be not to, I think. And just once you've made an album, then that's it. It's done. That's established, and we just kind of like to get on with a different thing.
Valkyrie had a very definite approach in that we tried to make it as live sounding as possible, and that one kind of stands out as where we consciously thought of a way to make something different. But mainly, I mean, there's some different gear. There's just our ears are tuned a little different for each project.
Yeah, but I mean,
new sounds for
it usually starts out with throwing out an idea like, hey, let's use more guitar, and let's get rid of the synths and stick with piano and organ, or let's ditch the piano and the organ and get real synthy, or let's try to be more modern. Let's not be modern at all.
Yeah,
they're just different.
Yeah.
Brandon asks, what do you guys think of different formats of music these days, such as cassettes making a comeback?
There's a company, I'm not going to name any companies, but there's a company on Instagram that I follow because I just like looking at all these weird cassettes they're popping out. They're in the dungeon synth category. It's the kind of music that it is, so if you've ever heard of that. But they have this kind of cool look to them, and I think they're mainly for collectors, cassettes are. And I'm not opposed to us doing something on a cassette sometime just for the heck of it.
Richard asks, how has the world of progressive rock changed since you first began writing together?
It has grown, and it's legitimized to a large extent. It's become a niche, but it's a very solid, firmly entrenched niche.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bands, a lot of young bands, who are picking it up and kind of turning it on its head and doing new things and approaching it in a young way, which is pretty excellent. But the idea that, 25, close to 30 years on, there'd be a major international glossy magazine devoted to prog music, and one or maybe even
shout out,
a major cruise, cruise like Cruise to the Edge, that would be a sellout every single year. Would not have predicted that. That's pretty amazing.
Cal asks, how do you start off when writing songs, and where do you begin? Usually
separately.
Yeah. Generally just starting with the sound. Usually it's chord progressions. I tend to think in terms of, trying to come up with an interesting chord progression and then try to marry some kind of melodic element to that later on. It usually doesn't start with the melody.
No.
Sometimes it does.
I sit out here for days. I have a bass in my lap and I'm playing a keyboard. And I start, sometimes a particular sound will trigger something, but really I'm like you, I'm kind of just looking for the chords. Yeah. And when the chords kind of get there, then I start thinking about the sound.
A little surprised and confused every time that it does happen.
Phil Marker wants to know, where's Tom?
That might be a alias for Tom. Wanted to find out if we know where Tom is.
Yeah, are you Tom?
Tom's out there.
Tom's out there. Every now and then on Facebook I see a post from Tom Timely, and that's him. Yeah. So I think he comes into our time, he leaves our time, if you believe any of that stuff. Or maybe Tom's in all of us. That's how to look at it.
But it's impossible to know where Tom is because Tom can literally be anywhere in space and time at this point.
Hey, Tom.
Which one of you is Glass and who's Hammer? Says Stefan.
I think I'm Hammer.
I'm the bass player.
Yeah, but
shouldn't I be the Hammer?
Oddly, I tend to write more of the heavy stuff, though.
He writes the heavy stuff. Yeah. I represent the fragility of glass,
Yes.
and he represents the power of the hammer. You see?
Who are the players on the new album?
Who are the players on the new album?
Hey, I know who asked that question. Reese Boyd asked that question.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, one of them
Because
is
Reese wants a
Reese
plug.
Boyd.
Yeah. Yeah. Reese Boyd's on this album.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And he rocks. He kills it.
Aaron's on this album. John Bigley from the UK. I like saying that.
Yeah, that is
You know,
a fun thing to say.
Because everybody with us, it's like Tennessee-based proggers. So if it's a geographical issue, we got a guy from London, doing some tracks for us.
Chris Aaron is on this album.
From Discipline,
Susie,
yes.
we think.
Oh yeah. Brian
Brewer
Yeah.
is on this album. And Barry Saroff, I hope I'm saying that name right. I'll be embarrassed if I'm not. From Eden
You
Song
won't care.
on flute.
Yeah.
And possibly James, although we don't know yet. He might
From
be
Eden Song.
From Eden
Yeah,
Song.
cool.
I've asked him. I don't know if
Yeah.
he actually wants to. But
Yeah.
he might want to.
When are we getting a live album? I think we have 3 or 4 of those already.
Yeah.
And mostly live in Italy is the coolest, latest thing that's that we've done. Just 2 years ago, we released it. So if you haven't got a copy of that, get a copy.
And it's sort of live.
And they had another part to that question. Will we play Empty Space Revealer on our next tour?
Well, that is such a strange question for somebody to jump up and ask. See, if we were going to play something like that, we would have probably wanted it to be a surprise.
So maybe we're going to play it.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I sat down already 3 months ago trying to figure out if I could play it.
Yeah. Well, the messed up part of that question is the word tour.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so our tour for 2020 so far is Cruise to the Edge, and we'll be touring from Miami to Belize to Honduras and back to Miami, I think, something like that. And that'll be the tour. So maybe you'll hear Empty Space Revealer.
Okay, I won't admit that we are playing Empty Space Revealer, but I will admit that I've learned to play Empty Space
I haven't
Revealer.
learned it yet.
I have. I can do it. It rocks.
Okay.
Which one of you would drive the Getaway car?
The question is, and I'm going to answer it before he can get a chance to, who would drive the Getaway car? And that
Yeah,
he would.
that would be me.
Nothing is going to stop Fred Schindel.
No.
I hope. I have ridden with him with my eyes closed, and I have ridden behind him, and he would get away. And so I'll do the stick up, and he can do he can wait outside in the car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When will we get a Game of Thrones album?
When will we get a Game of Thrones album? I imagine that's kind of in the domain of permissions.
Yeah. I believe there will be licensing fees involved there that would be exorbitant and insurmountable.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
we could thinly disguise it. We've already done that. I mean, there's been a Game of Thrones album, probably.
There has. I'm sure there has. I will say that if memory serves me correctly, George R.R. Martin signed the Glasshammer guest book many, many years ago.
Like
So
early 2000s.
he may be a fan. We've had a lot of famous authors sign the guest book when we had one, and I'm talking 20 years ago,
Yeah.
18 years ago, something like that. So who knows?